After my 11-year-old son and I were hit by a drunk driver, I wrote to the family chat, "We're in the hospital, alive but shaken." Not a single reply. Hours later, they were posting selfies for my niece's birthday brunch. No one came. 3 days later, I received 48 missed calls and one message from Dad. "Answer now. We need you." I did, and I heard. The crash didn't feel real until we were already spinning. We'd been driving home from the movie theater, just my son Jonah and me. It was early afternoon, sunny and clear, and he was excitedly talking about the film, quoting something that made no sense to me. I remember glancing over and smiling. Then there was a sound like an explosion. A white truck plowed through a red light, and everything went sideways, literally. When I opened my eyes, the airbag had deployed. Jonah was crying, but conscious. I could hear the driver of the other vehicle shouting slurred nonsense. I couldn't move my left leg. A bystander called 911. The guy who hit us reeked of beer. He actually tried to walk away. At the hospital, after they confirmed nothing was broken, just bruised ribs, a sprain for Jonah, and lots of cuts, I finally picked up my phone. I was shaking. I typed one message in the family chat. "We're in the hospital, alive but shaken. Drunk driver hit us. We'll update later." The message went through, and then silence. At first, I thought maybe they were all asleep, even though it was barely 1 p.m. Then I remembered what day it was. My niece, my sister Rachel's daughter, was having her golden birthday brunch. 11 years old, on the 11th, at that overpriced rooftop place downtown. I'd been invited, but said no, not because of the brunch, because I was working in the morning and had promised Jonah a movie that afternoon. I even dropped off a gift 2 days before. So I figured someone would check their phone. Someone would at least reply with, "Are you okay?" or "What hospital?" Maybe Rachel, maybe my mom, even my dad, who usually hovered like a helicopter anytime someone sneezed. But no, 3 hours passed. Jonah was asleep beside me, an IV drip for hydration, and I opened Instagram out of habit. The first photo hit like a slap. My sister, my parents, my cousins, all smiling at a long table covered in mimosas and pink balloons. My dad wearing a gold paper crown. My mom holding the birthday girl in a selfie. My brother toasting. All of them tagged in stories. All of them clearly on their phones. Every one of them had seen my message. None of them had answered. Not one came. Not one asked where we were. Not even a "How's Jonah?" We stayed in the hospital that night for observation. I didn't say much to the nurses or the doctor. I kept checking the chat. Still nothing. By the next morning, it was starting to feel like maybe I was dead and just no one had noticed. They finally discharged us around 1 p.m. the following day. Jonah and I took a cab home, sore and tired. I made soup, turned on Pertunes, and tried to act normal. I still hadn't gotten a single call from anyone in the family. Then, on the third day, my phone started vibrating non-stop. 48 missed calls, all from one person, my dad. No voicemails, just one message sent at 6:13 p.m. "Answer now. We need you." I stared at it for so long. Jonah had to say something. I don't remember what I said back, but I called. I was still expecting something, anything, about the accident, some kind of concern, but instead, the first words out of my father's mouth were something else entirely, and what he said next made me black out for a few seconds. Jonah later told me I'd fainted right there on the kitchen floor. I didn't even realize I'd passed out until I opened my eyes and saw Jonah's face right above me, pale and worried. I was lying on the kitchen floor, my phone buzzing somewhere behind me. He kept asking if I was okay. My phone was still lit up on the table with one last text from my dad, short and sharp. "Michelle, pick up. We need you." So I did. I should have trusted my gut the moment I heard his voice. Not concerned, not confused, just impatient. He didn't ask if we were okay, didn't ask what hospital we were in, didn't even mention Jonah. He launched straight into it. Said they were short this month, HOA fees were overdue, and their car needed new tires. Then he said something about Rachel needing help with a deposit for a school trip for the girls. He said it like it was urgent, like the world was spinning off its axis and I was the only one who could stop it. I said nothing. I don't think I could have formed words even if I wanted to. Then came the part that knocked the air out of me. He said, "It's not that much. You always help. Always help." He kept talking about the bills, the pressure, how Rachel was stressed and couldn't afford to disappoint her daughter, who, by the way, had been sipping mocktails at a rooftop party while my son was getting stitches across his eyebrow. When I didn't answer, he added, "It's not like you're struggling. You're always doing fine." I don't remember hanging up. I must have dropped the phone because the next thing I remember was Jonah calling my name, his hand on my arm, and me waking up on the floor. I didn't cry. I couldn't. I felt hollow, like I'd just discovered a deep private truth about my own life that had been there all along, waiting for me to finally look it in the eye. Later that day, I opened the family group chat again. I scrolled past my own unread message, the one where I told them we were in the hospital, and counted over a dozen more messages from the brunch. Photos, videos, jokes about my dad's bad dancing, a group picture with all of them holding up gold balloons. They all had their phones. They all saw my message. Every single one of them chose to ignore it. I showed Jonah. He didn't say anything at first, then asked me if I thought maybe they didn't believe me. I told him I wasn't sure what they believed anymore. 2 days later, Rachel messaged me like nothing had happened, asked if I could watch her girls Saturday night while she and her husband went to a concert, said she was so wiped from party planning. No mention of the accident, no "how's Jonah," just same time as usual. I didn't answer. The next morning, I woke up to a photo from my mom of her utility bill. No message, just the bill, as if I'd know what to do with it. I didn't even get angry. I just sat there staring at it, realizing this was the only kind of message I ever got from her anymore. Requests, needs, problems, never care. That afternoon, I told Jonah I was thinking of going to talk to them, my parents, in person. I expected him to shrug, maybe ask why, but instead he looked at me for a long time, then said, "You don't have to go if you don't want to." I told him I needed to, that I couldn't carry it anymore without saying it to their faces. He asked if he could come. So that Saturday, instead of babysitting my niece and her little sister, Jonah and I drove to my parents' house, and I was not ready for what was waiting behind that front door. The moment Jonah and I pulled into my parents' driveway, I had a feeling in my stomach I couldn't explain. Not quite dread, not quite anger, just something heavy and final, like I already knew this wasn't going to go the way I hoped. Jonah sat quiet in the passenger seat, hands in his lap. I asked if he wanted to wait in the car. He shook his head. My mom opened the door like she wasn't expecting anyone, even though I texted that morning. She didn't say hi, just glanced at Jonah, then turned around and walked back inside. We followed her without being invited in. My dad was in the recliner, half watching some sports channel. He didn't stand up, just said without looking at me, "So, did you bring it or not?" I stood there for a second before answering. "Bring what?" "The money," he said. "You got the text." That was it. No "how are you?" No "how's Jonah?" Just a follow-up to a demand. I told him I didn't come with money. I said I didn't understand how they could read that message, the one I sent from the hospital, where their grandson was bruised and bandaged, and not even reply. I told him it hurt me, that I didn't expect a parade, but I didn't expect nothing either. My mom finally sat down across from me and crossed her legs like she was settling in for a lecture. "We saw the message," she said, "but Michelle, you made it sound a lot worse than it really was." I said, "You think it wasn't bad enough?" "We've seen worse," she replied flatly. "You're both home. You're fine. If it had been serious, someone would have called us directly." Then my dad cut in. "And anyway, it was the day of Olivia's birthday. Rachel worked really hard to pull that together. You can't expect us to drop everything over a fender bender." A fender bender. That's how he described it. Like we'd bumped a shopping cart, not gotten hit by a drunk driver who ran a red light and tried to leave the scene while my son was screaming. I told them it wasn't just about the accident. It was the silence. The way they carried on like we didn't exist. The way they celebrated while I was staring at blood on my kid's shirt. I told them that if roles were reversed, if Rachel had been the one in the ER with her daughters, I knew damn well I'd have been there. Rachel walked in from the kitchen at that point with a glass of wine and said, "You always make everything about you." I turned to her. "I was in the hospital." She shrugged. "And now you're not." Jonah was standing next to me, holding my hand tighter than usual. I looked at him, then back at them, and said I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't keep being the one who gave and got nothing but silence or guilt in return. I said I was done pretending this was a two-way relationship. It wasn't. My dad said, "So you're going to punish us now over nothing?" My mom said, "You always overreact." Rachel said, "She'll be back next week, same as always. Wait until she needs help with something." I looked at Jonah again. He mouthed, "Please, can we go?" And that was it. We left without another word. I didn't slam the door. I didn't yell. I just walked out and let it close behind me like it had closed on so many parts of my life before I was ready. When we got home, I opened my banking app and started cutting them off. I stopped paying their internet, stopped covering their electric bill, their phone plan. I canceled the monthly auto transfer to their checking account, the one I'd set up years ago when my dad was recovering from back surgery and Rachel had just divorced her first husband. The first call came the next day, my mom asking if I'd accidentally canceled something. Then Rachel messaged me asking if I could still babysit Saturday, and I didn't even answer. My dad texted later that week to say the electric bill was due and their card had bounced. I ignored that, too. The silence I got then was different from the silence I got in the hospital. This time it was angry, pressurized, and temporary. They were gonna come back. They always did when they wanted something. I just didn't know how far they'd go to try to get it. I didn't think no would have to be said more than once, but with my family, saying no was like a language they never bothered to learn. For almost 2 weeks, I ignored every request, every guilt trip, every message framed as a reminder or favor. My mom sent a picture of a power bill with no context. My dad sent a screenshot of his empty bank account with a sad face emoji. Rachel, of course, was the worst, alternating between sarcasm and manipulation like it was some kind of sport. And then she just showed up. It was a Thursday. I'd worked a long shift, stopped by the store, and was looking forward to finally lying down. But there she was, sitting on my front porch with her daughters, both glued to their tablets like they were waiting on an Uber. She stood up and said, "Can you watch them for a bit? Something came up, emergency." I said no. I told her I wasn't available, that she should have called, that I couldn't just show up and expect me to drop everything. Rachel didn't argue. She just smiled, turned around, got back in her car, and left. I didn't even move. I just stood there, keys still in my hand, watching her drive off like it was perfectly normal to leave 2 kids with someone you'd barely spoken to in weeks. The girls didn't even look up. One of them asked if I had fruit snacks. I let them in, I gave them dinner, turned on a movie, and texted Rachel once, "I did not agree to this. Do not do this again." No reply. She didn't come back until 9:12 p.m. She didn't knock, just rang the bell, grabbed their coats, said, "Thanks, I owe you one," and walked away. No apology, no explanation, not even a look. That night, Jonah and I sat in silence. He was reading something for school, but every few minutes he glanced over at me. Finally, he asked, "Would you let me leave my kids like that?" I said, "No." He nodded like he already knew the answer. I don't want to be like them, he said, ever. The next morning, I got an email from the electric company. Not mine, my parents'. Apparently, I was still listed as the secondary contact on their account, something I'd forgotten about completely. The subject line said, "Final Shutoff Notice," in bold red letters. I stared at it for a long time, then closed it. They were learning what life without my help actually looked like. But what I didn't expect, what hit me out of nowhere, was the phone call later that day. It was a number I didn't recognize, but the voice on the other end was familiar. "Michelle, it's Aunt Lorraine. I just heard. Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, "Tell you what?" She said, "The accident, the hospital, everything. I had no idea. Your mom said it was nothing, that you were being dramatic again, but the neighbor mentioned something and it didn't sit right, so I called." For a second, I didn't know what to say. I'd kept it all so bottled up, assuming no one cared, or worse, that they all agreed with what my parents had decided I was. But Lorraine just kept talking. She asked how Jonah was, if we needed anything. She sounded like someone who had been waiting for a reason to reach out. She said, "They've always put Rachel on a pedestal. You've been the fallback for years. It's not your job anymore." I didn't know she'd seen it too. That same evening, she invited us to dinner, said to come casual, no pressure, just food and company. Jonah was hesitant until I told Aunt Lorraine had a dog in a big backyard. Then he was all in. We drove out there Saturday night. Lorraine and her husband live in a small house outside of town. Nothing fancy, but it felt like a different planet compared to my parents'. No tension, no cold looks, no waiting to be asked for something. We had spaghetti and garlic bread. Jonah played catch with their dog in the yard, while Lorraine asked me about work, about how I was really doing. Not once did she bring up money or favors or the past. She just listened. On the way home, Jonah said, "They're different. They actually like us." I said, "I think they do." And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I'd finally stepped out of the role I'd been stuck in, the responsible one, the fixer, the emotional backup plan. For once, I wasn't being used. I was just being seen. The day after dinner at Aunt Lorraine's, I woke up with something I hadn't felt in a while. Stillness. Not the empty kind, the kind that fills you when something heavy has been lifted off you. But silence, when it comes to people like my family, never stays quiet for long. By Monday, the texts started again. My mom sent a photo of her medicine cabinet and wrote, "Running low, can you get these?" My dad sent a text that just said, "Mortgage past due, let me know." And Rachel, she had the nerve to send me a voice memo that started with, "Look, I know you're still being weird, but can you watch the girls this weekend or not?" No one asked how I was, not once. They didn't check in on Jonah, didn't bring up the hospital, the accident, the silence. All they wanted to know was what I could still do for them. That was the currency, my usefulness. So I didn't reply. I made breakfast for Jonah, took him to school, worked a double shift. I came home, watered the plants on our little balcony, and ignored my phone like it was poisoned. It took exactly 5 days before someone lost their patience, and of course, it was Rachel. She showed up again. This time, she was angry. Not performative Rachel-style angry, like sighing and eye-rolling like usual, but boiling, real anger. She was waiting by my door, arms crossed, face tight. I stepped out and told her I wasn't in the mood. She said, "You don't get to do this. You don't get to just disappear." I didn't say anything. She went on, "Mom and Dad are barely holding it together. Olivia cries because she thinks you hate her, and now I'm the bad guy because you decided to have some kind of midlife meltdown." I said calmly, "I almost lost my son." She didn't even blink. "You didn't," she said, "so stop acting like you did. You think you're the only one with problems? Everyone's going through something. You just made it into this show." I asked her what exactly she wanted from me. She said, "I want my sister back, the one who used to care, the one who didn't make things difficult." I looked at her for a long time, and then I said, "You don't miss me. You miss the things I did for you." She didn't respond to that, just left. No apology, no change, same as always. But 2 days later, things got worse. I got a call at work. It was from the property manager of my parents' neighborhood. Apparently, my dad had listed me as a secondary guarantor on the HOA account without telling me, and now they were threatening to take legal action if the outstanding balance wasn't paid, almost $1,800. I called my dad. No answer. Then I got a text. "I didn't think you'd mind. You always cover it." No explanation, no warning, just the assumption that I do what I always did: fix it. And that's when it hit me. They weren't trying to hurt me, not deliberately. They didn't hate me. They just didn't see me. They saw a wallet, a babysitter, a spare parent for Rachel's kids, someone who would always be there because she always had been. I didn't cry that night. I thought I would, but I didn't. I just sat at the kitchen table while Jonah did his homework and quietly removed myself from every account, every shared responsibility, every just-in-case contact they'd ever used me for. Utilities, HOA, even the emergency contact at their pharmacy. Gone. And they noticed. The next day, my dad left a voicemail. "You're really doing this to your family?" Then came the guilt, the threats. Rachel sent a message saying, "I hope you're proud. When Mom gets sick again, don't bother showing up." I didn't reply. Instead, that weekend, I brought Jonah to Lorraine's again. We grilled burgers. He helped her husband change the oil in her car. We watched old movies. Lorraine made hot cocoa and gave Jonah a sweater that used to belong to her son when he was his age. At one point, I stepped outside to get something from the car and just stood there in the driveway for a minute, breathing. Jonah came out behind me and said, "Can we come here for Thanksgiving?" I turned to him. "You sure?" He nodded. "It's quieter here. I like quiet now." It was the first time I realized how much all of it had affected him. Not just the accident, the family, the way they drained us like it was normal. We stayed late that night, and as we were leaving, Lorraine handed me a little envelope. Inside was a note, handwritten. "No one gets to decide your worth but you. I see you. So does Jonah." She didn't owe me anything. She wasn't trying to control me. She wasn't trying to guilt me or use me. She was just choosing to care. And for once, I let someone care without suspicion, without waiting. The family group chat lit up 2 days before Thanksgiving. Rachel wrote, "Dinner at Mom and Dad's at 4 p.m. You're still doing the pumpkin pie, right, Michelle?" My mom chimed in, "Don't forget the whipped cream this time. The kids were disappointed last year." No greeting, no "are you coming?" Not even a mention of what had happened in the last month. It was as if none of it had taken place. The hospital, the ignored messages, the fallout, Jonah's injury, Rachel dumping her kids on me like a package on a porch. And yet, somehow, I was still expected to show up with dessert like clockwork. I didn't answer. I didn't bake a pie. I didn't even open the group chat again. On Thanksgiving Day, Jonah and I got in the car and drove to Aunt Lorraine's. She'd made the whole meal from scratch. Turkey, stuffing, sweet potatoes with the marshmallows slightly burnt. Jonah loved that part. And pecan pie instead of pumpkin. The table wasn't decorated like something out of a magazine. No centerpieces or place cards, just food, warmth, and people who actually asked how we were doing. Her daughter, who I barely knew before all this, brought out a box of old ornaments and asked Jonah to help her hang them on the tree. He grinned like he'd just been handed a winning lottery ticket. Her husband handed me a glass of wine and said, "We're just glad you're here. That's it. No guilt, no conditions, just gladness." Halfway through dinner, I checked my phone out of habit. There was the group chat again. My mom had posted a photo of the dinner table back at their house. Everyone gathered round, plates full, candles lit, and then right after that, another message from Rachel. "So you're really not coming? Not even a text? Wow." A minute later, "You could have at least sent the pie." Then silence again. I turned my phone over and left it face down on the table. That night, as we drove home, Jonah asked, "Do you think they'll ever understand why we didn't come?" I said, "Maybe, but I don't think they care enough to try." And he just nodded, staring out the window. "It's okay. This one was better anyway." He was right. It was better. Not perfect, not fancy, but better in the way that mattered, in the kind of better that felt safe and real. A few days later, Lorraine texted me asking if we had plans for Christmas Eve. She wrote, "No pressure, but we'd love to have you again. Family's coming and I've got a ham with your name on it." It wasn't a demand. It wasn't wrapped in guilt. It was just an open door. I said yes. Christmas Eve was something I hadn't felt in years. Joyful without the performance. Lorraine has stocking for Jonah with his name stitched on it. Inside were small gifts, socks, snacks, and a new pair of